Last week, as the latest massive hurricane came crashing into the United States, people looking for news about it were yet again treated to stuff like this.
Everything you are looking at, this water that is surging onto a terrain that's already storm wounded here in Fort Myers Beach.
So we'll be watching for that pull of water and surge issues all the way through tomorrow morning here in Tampa Bay.
I will tell you, one of the things we have started to see here is flashes, and it's a little bit hard to tell whether we're seeing lightning or transformers go boom.
People who are supposed to be doing journalism, standing outside in dangerous storms, getting blown and battered around. There is no news in this, even though the storms themselves are huge news and do have to be covered. Now, you might think, okay, so this kind of stunt might not be necessary, but if it's something people are choosing to do, what's the harm? Well, there is harm, not just in the immediate sense, but in a much, much bigger sense, because the same false thinking about news that drives these kinds of stunts also leads to all the other kinds of problems that I've been talking about on this show. Giving live open mics to liars, failing to fact check things they say, rushing to report things without ensuring truth. This happens on all platforms, on the web, video, audio, social media, and physical newspapers. So the problem with storm coverage speaks to a central problem with news today. And it's a problem that Trump and his campaign and others have been using to their benefit. That is coming up. Also, a listener got in touch with me. He's a global marketing expert. He became one of the top officials at one of the biggest marketing and advertising companies in the world. He understands so much about how people respond to messaging, and he argues that the media is missing the biggest story of this election. And something I can tell you definitively is this: the media aren't even looking into whether that might be the big story of the election. You'll hear that coming up. Plus, something the New York Times said about facts was so off the mark and needs to be corrected. And it will be. Here, today, on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. I'm Josh Lebs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact checks the news. The responses we're getting show that new people are joining us every week. That is so awesome. Thank you. And if this is your first time here, then welcome. And to those of you who have been with me since the beginning, almost 6 months now, thank you. For those of you who are new, here's the quick rundown. I spent 20 years inside the mainstream media, 10 on NPR and 10 at CNN. I became lead on-air fact checker. I then wrote a book and launched my own communications business, and I publish op-eds everywhere. Through those experiences, I have seen systemic problems inside the mainstream media that need to be fixed. These problems are having a huge impact on our society, and I realized that the media seems like this mysterious thing to other people. People have lots of questions about how it really works on the inside. So this show is showing you how that sausage is made and how we can work to fix the systemic problems. With each episode, I send out a newsletter that is packed with facts and links. I want you to see this stuff for yourself if you wish. There's also videos and images, lots of good stuff. I have been making that available for free. You can find the link in my show notes or at my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. Just click newsletter. While that is free, one of the best ways to support this show is to choose to become a paid subscriber. And if you do, you get access to exclusive content and direct access to me. By the way, one piece of exclusive content shows you how you can probably save a ton of money on monthly subscriptions to lots of places because you can get free legal access to content from lots of news sites, including newspapers. Anyway, more about that later on. Let's jump into this. This problem with storm coverage is so widespread, it's basically in all news outlets. When I play you these clips, it's just because these are the ones that came up first when I was looking at them, or they're clips that people sent me. That's basically always how I ensure fairness. I go by what people send me or whatever comes up first. These are representative of how the news media is just so wrong in how it handles storm coverage this way. Here is WPLG in South Florida.
And it's definitely a hold on to your hat moment. In fact, if you take a look, you can see how that wind is just churning up what looks like an angry, choppy sea. And I got to tell you, in just the last 20 minutes,
The reporter is standing out in these heavy winds, water starting to rush onto land. She's literally holding her baseball cap onto her head.
Real time, everything you are looking at, this water that is surging onto a terrain that's already storm wounded here in Fort Myers Beach. Remember this area pummeled by Ian. Take a look as you are looking live at that storm surge.
By the way, water, including storm surge, kills more people than wind in hurricanes. Later, that same reporter announced that the car the crew had been using became surrounded by water. So now they're somewhere else and she's standing in water. Meanwhile, here is CNN.
One of the things we have started to see here is flashes, and it's a little bit hard to tell whether we're seeing lightning or transformers go boom. I'm pretty sure one of them at least was a transformer, which doesn't bode well for the power situation. Power will almost certainly go out.
Lots of these reports are followed up with lines like this. Here's someone on ABC tossing back to the anchor in the studio.
So we'll be watching for that pull of water and surge issues all the way through tomorrow morning here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, we are certainly hoping that everybody there stays safe, including you and the whole crew.
I 100% believe that. They want people to be safe. And there's no reason for these folks to be taking these risks in the first place. We'll make that no journalistic reason. That might sound surprising. And I know a lot of people love watching clips like this on YouTube or whatever. I'll get to that in a second. It is a big part of what has made the Weather Channel. In fact, mainstream news outlets get video of people on the Weather Channel doing things that even their own reporters sometimes aren't doing. Here's a clip from CNN.com. This was a couple years ago. This showed the Weather Channel's Jim Cantori getting struck by a tree branch while he's outside covering a hurricane.
Just came flying by. All right, you know what? I think I'm just going to come in here for a second.
Then he kind of fights through the wind to go over and hold on to a one-way sign, like to try to prevent himself from being blown away. But who's to say that that side will hold him, because there's another sign right next to it that's now flat on the ground.
Jim, come on in for some cover, my man. Come on in. Come on in. We can have a conversation when you're under some cover. That's too much.
Yes, I will put links to these clips in the newsletter so you can see them. If people like watching this stuff, fine. But it's not journalism. And you might think, well, wait a second. Aren't they showing us how powerful the storm is? The answer to that is no, they're not. I've gone through so many of these reports, and I consistently find this. There is no information that you get from seeing a reporter get thrown around by winds and powerful rains that you would not get from video taken safely from inside. Most people are capable of understanding that if a branch from a tree is getting thrown around and street signs are down and all these objects are flying around, then a person could also have those same things happen to them. There's zero new information that you're getting from people taking these risks. The Washington Post did a piece about this kind of reporting last year. Here's something they said.
Such participatory journalism has no equal in the news business. War reporters usually do not place themselves in the midst of combat, and police reporters typically do not do stand-ups in the middle of a shootout. A reporter covering not so with severe weather reporting, especially in an age when clips like Cantor meets tree branch can quickly go viral.
Look, if people want to do this, and other people like watching it, that is its own question. Daredevil stuff, oh, look at me and this thing I'm doing. If people are into that, have that conversation. But it's not journalism. And that's not about me being a purist. This is practical, because this problem has real effects. First, I know from having worked in newsrooms, people do feel pressure to do this kind of thing. Even though basically every news agency says, oh, we take all these precautions and we make sure our people are safe, this stuff gets views and there are always ratings battles, and people do take risks. Taking risks in the name of journalism is very different. You know, like with certain kinds of war reporting, there are risks that you take to get people information that they couldn't get otherwise. That's not what's happening here. But also there's another problem. In this era, when everyone has a video camera in their pocket, they see this stuff on the news, and it can make them want to go do the same thing so they can get clicks. After all, if a news agency gets clicks this way, why shouldn't they? Here's another clip from that Washington Post piece.
Moreover, there is a paradox in the message and the messenger, reporters telling people to stay home because of the danger when the reporters are out there in the danger themselves.
By the way, this piece embedded a clip from WFTV in Jacksonville in which a giant vertical shopping center sign collapsed behind a reporter.
Please tell me you were recording. I was. You were? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
She does seem to have been at a safe distance away from that sign, but those winds can make things fly at you quickly. There are solutions to this. Right? News agencies can take video from inside, as I said. They can also use drones to take video. You might think that sounds expensive, but it's nothing compared to sending a crew out in dangerous conditions. And anyway, obviously, there's no comparison. But as I mentioned at the top, the problem here is actually much larger because this kind of thing builds an institutional idea into news agencies that they exist to show spectacles that will get ratings and clicks rather than to do the job of journalism at all times, providing truths that matter. That way of thinking leads to all these other problems. Why was Trump in the news so much more than other Republicans in 2015 and 2016? Why did he get so much more airtime than Clinton in 2016? There was a study that found he got more than twice as much time across ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that was from the beginning of 2016 through Labor Day. Why did he get more time? Because of this addiction to spectacles. What will people tune in for? What will they look at? What will they listen to? Not what journalism are we doing. It's, let's present this thing and maybe people will watch. Let's write this thing and people might click or pick up our newspaper. Let's talk about this thing and people might listen to our radio station or our feed. Presenting spectacles instead of pursuing news is normalized by this kind of thinking. And that gets to the heart of a whole new way of looking at media during the presidential race. The media might be missing the biggest story of this race. That is coming up. One piece of bad news. Podcasts that spread lies and give platforms to liars, unfortunately, very often get tons of traffic. But we can fight back, and it just takes a few seconds, and it's free. Whatever platform you're using, take 15 seconds and click to give it a great rating. And a bunch of them have reviews. So if you're using Apple Podcasts, that has ratings and reviews. Spotify has ratings. We're up on Audible now. You can rate us there too. Anytime you give this show a great review, it tells the algorithms, spread the word about this. Like here's a new one that just popped up on Apple Podcasts. This is from Sarah Wado. It says, Josh is phenomenal at pulling the curtain back and telling the truth about what stories are covered and why. He knows the media industry from the inside out and shares that expertise here. Definitely listen, and I'd encourage you to subscribe as well. And I read it that way because she ended on an exclamation point. Thank you so much. And yes, it's total humble brag for me to read these things, but it's super pragmatic. Getting the truth out in the attention economy is hard, but that little action makes all the difference. So, here's a little background music for you while you go do that. Are you done? Thank you. On this show, I've talked about how the media should always look for big picture truths. For example, if there's something happening at a business, maybe that's interesting in an immediate sense, but it might also be a sign that the people in charge are trying to reshape what the business does. The same goes for all of society. Sometimes what you're seeing is actually a sign of society changing or people trying to change it. Like I've discussed how there's a big lie of the right and a big lie of the left, but the big lie of the left has not overtaken the Democratic Party. That's big picture stuff. Or how this U.S. presidential election is largely about a fight for democracy. But sometimes understanding reality requires not zooming out, but kind of doing the opposite, zooming in, going deep to figure out what's happening inside the minds of people who are being swayed by things they hear in the media. That is why I was so struck by this guest you're about to hear. He's a marketing expert, actually a top global marketing expert. He became a top official at Saatchi & Saatchi, which is a multi-billion-dollar marketing and advertising agency. Great marketers like him have to understand how people think and behave, how they make decisions. Not just about buying stuff, but in deciding where they stand on things or how they vote, all kinds of decisions. And lots of research shows that the vast majority of decisions that people make are not rational, they're instinctive. His name is Vaughn Emsley. He's a listener to this show and someone I've worked with. He's written about this presidential race for The Hill and U.S. News and World Report. Really interesting guy with a really interesting take on what's driving so many people to support Trump despite his constant lying and the awful things he does. And Vaughn also has an interesting take on what has happened to the media and how those things interrelate. You'll hear that ahead. But to set this up right, I need to tell you about something. There is a professor and author named George Lakoff. You might hear his name in political analyses. He's an expert on linguistics and how the mind works. Now you might be like, wait a second, why is Josh suddenly telling us about someone else? Here's the deal. George Lakoff has written about how people feel on a deep level about who should hold power. Vaughn Emsley, who you're about to hear, says George Lakoff is right about that.
He had a very clear statement about how Republicans see hierarchies of who should be in charge. And these connect very well also with Christian nationalist beliefs. So white over black, rich over poor, men over women, Christian over Muslim, man over the environment, straight over gay. That idea of a group of people have a right to rule is, of course, a royalist idea. So they have a very static view of what the right hierarchy should be. And everything they are doing today is trying to entrench that hierarchy in a way that it cannot be challenged in the future, because they feel the movement demographically, attitudinally, is so strongly against them that if they don't freeze everything in place, then that hierarchy will effectively be overthrown.
The media isn't even looking into this concept. So even if I can't tell you right now, okay, this percentage of Republicans feel this way, I can tell you that no one is surveying for it, or from what I can see, asking about it. That, most of the interviews with potential voters, as always, remain very superficial. Like,
right.
What issues do you care about? Oh, I care about local manufacturing or whatever. And that is speaking to the rational mind. And most of the decisions people make, almost all of our decisions are made in the irrational mind. And that's when you get into deeper stuff like values. And if the media wanted to genuinely get at the depth of what's going on, this would be something they ask about on all sides. Like, fundamentally, deep down inside, let's take a moment here and really think, how do you feel about this group of people? Who do you think should be in charge? Are you seeing the media understand this, recognize it, look into it in places others not seeing?
No, it's not. They're not. Media and television news particularly has moved into the area of entertainment, taken on board the aspects of reality television in many ways, not a focus on ideas, not particularly on great themes. You simply see the stories of people behaving in an extreme and absurd and very often objectionable way. The fact that Trump became nationally known through a reality television program makes him like catnip for the media, given the fact that they're not really today seeking to inform and educate like Cronkite and Murrow and those people. They're simply there to entertain people. And the media actually today benefits from chaos because that enables you to fill a 24-hour news cycle. The example you quote in your latest podcast of Trump and the pet eating kerfuffle in Springfield is a very good example because it has all the aspects of reality television about it. I cannot imagine Cronkite spending more than a minute on that nonsense.
I look for facts, I look for truth, and I look for big picture truths. But what are the myriad ways in which marketers, including marketers for campaigns, take advantage of the media.
Fundamentally, and this is where I think marketing and politics diverge, is that marketing is finding out what's fundamental in how people feel about a brand, a category, and understanding how you can use that belief or beliefs about things, about life in general, to win a competitive advantage. So for me, it's not about tricks, but it's going deep down into psychology and beliefs to understand what really matters to people. And the way the media covers political debate, they don't do that. They exist at a very superficial level. They do shallow focus groups, patently misleading quantitative surveys, just to keep the ball rolling. If you do a survey asking people which are the 10 most important issues, people will rank those issues. But if you ask them on a blank piece of paper, fill out the most important thing to you about your life in the next 5 years, it probably wouldn't reflect any of those 10 issues. What's missing really is depth, not so much in long form. And Substack, I think, is a great antidote to this festival of the trivial, which we see almost consistently. But
I'm on Substack. You know that.
Sorry? And you're on Substack? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I don't answer on phone calls, so I don't get a lot of those surveys. But I had someone come to my door. They asked me what's the most important in the election, but it was only multiple choice, like what you just said. And I said, is protecting and maintaining democracy on there? And it wasn't one of the choices. I was like, how is that not on this?
Right.
But of the options that we gave them and their understandings of these terms, this is what this percentage of people said is not as sexy as voters care about this. And I always say every survey should include a knowledge section, like not to shame them, but for two reasons. One, so you understand where they're coming from in what their quote unquote opinions are. And two, maybe in the process of asking them some back questions, they'll actually learn and you have the chance to educate them. But they don't do that, even though it's often news agencies carrying this out.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And you can't move forward unless you put ideas in front of people which they haven't thought about before. But then you have to be able to conceive of those ideas originally and creatively.
See what I mean? He's so interesting. You'll be hearing more from him in the future because there's another issue we discussed that speaks to tactics of the right and the left and how different media are influenced by those tactics, sometimes without even realizing it. This is an example of how I love when people come to me with new insights and perspectives about the media. Now, I'm going to emphasize this. Obviously, not everyone who votes one way or another fits into any specific mentality. That's not what this is about. This is about a set of values that might be widespread in a core base of a party, but we don't know because the media is not looking into it. And keep in mind, less than a third of Americans align with each of the two major parties. A bigger number identify as independent. Anyway, you also heard in there why Vaughn offers insight into what I was talking about at the top, the storm coverage. The media benefits from chaos. I would love to know what you think about all this. I'll tell you how you can share your thoughts, either in writing or in audio, coming up. I am so grateful to the sponsors who have been coming along to make this show possible, including MIT 45. The company's on a mission to bring peace, vitality, and relief to the world by empowering individuals to be more of their unique, incredible selves. They do this by creating innovative, exceptional products, sourcing high-quality materials, and keeping standards high, including for safety. Their products include Kratom, and the folks at MIT 45 want you to learn all about it and make informed decisions. We're back. This is They Stand Corrected. I'm Josh Lives. A listener recently sent me something from the New York Times in which a reporter wrote this, quote, "Our mission at the Times is to seek the truth and help people understand the world, and we do that by asking tough questions and letting the facts speak for themselves." That sounds great, but there's a lot wrong with it, and it provides an opportunity to break down parts of what's wrong with today's mainstream media. So here goes. First, I canceled my New York Times subscription after they rehired a quote-unquote journalist in Gaza who openly praises Hitler. They also ran an op-ed from a Hamas official and let that person pretend that he cares so much about civilians and saving lives, when in reality, Hamas says openly that it worships death and it organizes celebrations when civilians are killed in Israel. The idea that the New York Times sticks to any journalistic mission is false. But by the way, I can still see any New York Times story in full with no paywall through a system that I tell my paid subscribers about in my newsletter. Virtually all newspapers, actually. Anyway, there are other problems with this statement as well. First, the idea that facts speak for themselves. Everything a news outlet reports should be about facts. Everything. And the news outlet should be active in pushing those into everything it ever puts out. Anything that suggests that we can be passive about presenting facts, they just are sort of there speaking for themselves, suggests the lack of urgency in getting them to you. But here's the trickiest part. They refer to asking tough questions. That's problematic too. Over the years, I have been praised by people for asking what they call tough questions, and I appreciate that, and I know they mean it as a compliment, so I don't say anything. But I try to avoid that term myself. Here's why. A question is only tough if the person doesn't want to answer it. Like, why did you say this and then say the opposite the next day? That's only tough if the person can't explain it. Why did you vote for this thing? Or would you take the following step if you were mayor or governor or president or whatever? The mission of journalism is to seek the truth and help people understand the world. That part's right. The way to do that is to create a news agency that's only about truth, never any of the other stuff that I've been pointing to on this show, all of the failures. Put facts first, always, and then context, because facts plus context equals truth. The Times obviously has not been doing that. Instead, it has been carrying water for the big lie of the left, this idea of big bad Israel, just as right-wing media have been carrying water for the big lie of the right, a stolen election as part of a great replacement theory. If news agencies were firmly committed to their mission, our whole society would be better off. You might have heard in a previous episode, I offered a 3-word oath that news agencies should take: provide only truth. Speaking of all that, I told you in the last episode that I'm publishing an open letter to the media about this coming October 7th, the anniversary of the worst terrorist attack of modern times. And I'm writing about the editorial steps that they should take to ensure that they do their job instead of getting caught up in the chaos and stunts of the anti-Israel protesters who have all this stuff planned for that day in order to get the media's attention. That open letter is now available for you to share. So please do spread the word. Send it to every journalist at every news outlet in the world. Just go to joshlevs.com and click newsletter, and you'll see it right there. There's also a link in the show notes. And if you're a paid subscriber, you can add your comments to that same newsletter. Next week, I'm keynoting an event in Columbia, South Carolina at a memorial for the victims of October 7th. The theme is resilience and unity. I'm hoping to bring you at least part of that speech here on the show. As always, I love hearing from you. Send your thoughts, ideas, requests, etc. There are 2 ways to do that. As I mentioned, paid subscribers can do that through the newsletter. You can message me there or post in comments. Everyone can access a form. It's a really cool form. It's designed using this tool that prevents bots from swamping it. You'll see that my website, joshlevs.com, the submit a question form. Both systems are designed to keep out haters and spammers so that you can get your message through without all that nonsense. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.